Yo, welcome to the Lab Science Podcast. This is episode 34. It's your boy, Professor Sense. I hope you are doing well. I am having a good week. Hope you've been having a good week. Things have been pretty productive, I have to say. We mentioned it maybe a week or two ago, but I've been deep in this Brian Hood Profitable Producer course, and I'm seeing gains on it immediately. It's awesome to take a couple of tweaks in your day-to-day workflow and your weekly workflow and see gains come out of it. So salute to the new clients I've been working with. Shout out to the Brooklyn Combine. We got a lot of stuff to go over. I wanted to mention that because I've been kind of knee-deep in this business side of things and coursing, you will see us talk a lot more about business-related topics, marketing-related topics. We are a podcast geared for musicians first, for producers, for engineers, for recording artists first, and that's a big part of your career. I think there's a lot of resources for the productive side of things, the production side of things, I should say, the creative side of things. A lot of the discussion around your career gets ignored, and that's something that I do want to get back into doing. Today's topic kind of blends both of those worlds. We're going to talk about finding your sound, which I think is something as DJs, producers, and songwriters is really important in today's market. There's some creative techniques that'll get you there. There are some more business-related and kind of marketing-related techniques that can get you there. So we're going to talk a whole lot about that and how you can approach that if you've been struggling with it especially. I think it's really important to consider. I got finished watching Quincy a few minutes ago with my wife. Fantastic view. It's a documentary done by Netflix on the life of the amazing composer, producer, writer, Quincy Jones. I learned a lot, man. I mean, somebody that has done, so much work, it's impossible to know their full catalog. So I think it's a cool thing to look into if you don't know Quincy's catalog. It really interested me seeing how much he'd done with hip hop and how much hip hop had done for him. Kind of seeing him get his first solo Grammy and knowing how much like the rap side of things influenced that was really cool. He always rode hard for rap music, and you don't always see that from guys of that ilk. He was studying early in the 30s. So salute to Quincy. Check out the documentary if you haven't seen it. We got a lot to talk about, so I want to jump straight into things. Right off the bat, CBC News and the Toronto Star have alleged that Ticketmaster has basically been condoning and working with scalpers, which is insane to think. A few episodes back, we talked about touring being the number one resource for getting money as an artist. So to see the gatekeeper have its hands in the cookie jar is really nuts. Basically, CBC News, and I should preface this by saying until this is proven, these are allegations. I'm going to link the source data in the show notes. It does seem to check out for what it's worth, and CBC News seems to be a pretty reputable media outlet out of Canada. But they pointed to a lot of really messed up practices. Mainly, Ticketmaster doesn't list every seat at the beginning of the process whenever they announce a concert, and they change that price throughout the process. You can do a lot with that off the bat. It just sounds sketchy because it is, but here's the big issue that I have with that. It drives up demand at will. Let's say that you want to see your favorite artist. You see their show hit your inbox. Oh, new artist concert announced. Cool. You might initially pass on it. You check out prices and say, I'm not going to spend that money this time. Cool. Because of ads and because they've targeted you, you're going to see reminders of this concert a few more times. You're probably going to check again. So the next time you see these tickets available and you check prices, you now see that there's only a few seats left because Ticketmaster hasn't listed every seat that's available. They've pretended that this show is more sold out than it really is. And since they've adjusted prices based on targeting, now you see less seats and you see pricier seat prices. So you might feel that fake sense of social validation because an artist that you were on the fence of seeing is selling out really quickly. How many times have we done this? You see an artist first have ticket sales go up, and then because tickets are almost sold out, you feel the pressure you feel FOMO. You have that instinct to buy a ticket kick in. So Ticketmaster knows that. They've scaled tickets back for a little bit to make you feel the sense of urgency. And now when you come back to get tickets the second, third, fourth, fifth, or sixth time, you buy them and they're at a higher price. So it's a super sketchy way to get a fake sense of what's called social validation. Social validation is, and this is something you should know as an artist, this is why your outward facing stuff is so important. Social validation is when the public makes you feel better about something. Society approves something, so in such you approve of it too. And Ticketmaster is faking this social validation by implying that the concert is sold out. It's making you think, oh shit, everybody around me wants to see this show too. I should probably get on board. When in reality, they've only shown you the tickets for section A and there's section B, C, and D coming later. And the really shady thing about this is it allows them to repeat the process over time. If you announce a show a couple months in advance, you can keep rolling out these limited tickets and catch a new set of suckers every time you target a new demographic. It's really, really sketchy practice, again, assuming this is what's really going on. Another thing that the report pointed out, Ticketmaster is a company that's denounced scalping in the past. They now have a verified reseller section. They basically have gone from being completely against reselling tickets to kind of having their own version of it. And in cases of a resale, they get to dip into the pot twice. So if you look at this report, they used an example of a Bruno Mars ticket. A Bruno Mars ticket goes for $209. If you go and buy a Bruno Mars ticket, you drop $210. Ticketmaster gets $25 off of that initial sale. Let's say that because of this money you spent, you're now broke, you got to pick up an extra work shift, and now all of a sudden, shit, you can't even go to the show. You've got to sell the ticket back. If you use Ticketmaster's service to resell your ticket properly the right way, they're going to make an additional $75 off of the resale. They make more money for scalping and reselling tickets than they do off of that initial sale. And that's a huge problem. I'm sure there's a business study that points to it, but if a company benefits more from you not really using the product, it's not a good business model on the side of the consumer. So that's a huge issue. With this in mind, what should you take away from this all as an artist? I know a lot of us aren't dealing with Ticketmaster yet, and hopefully you will be one day. And by the time that you're there, hopefully your business affairs are in order. But I think there's a key takeaway we can get out of this, and that's internalize your ticket process, internalize your money transfer process with the people that you are selling a product to. We talked about developing your website last week in episode 33. But keeping a good mobile-friendly website with mobile ticketing options is super important and super easy to do in 2018. Ticketmaster is going to have it already has a real sketchy feeling around it as a business. Nobody likes working with Ticketmaster, but they have to. It's pretty close to a monopoly in a lot of regards, and it'll be interesting to see if that gets pulled up in pursuing this case. But picture yourself and picture the consumer that you're trying to sell a ticket to, and the connection that they get if they're loading your site on their phone. And we talked about how to make that site cool and clean. So they're loading up your site. They go to your site for cool content all the time. Now you're going into their town and they're going to your site and buying a ticket directly via PayPal or Venmo or whatever, method of payment you set up on your site. They get a personalized confirmation ticket on their phone. If you do it through Eventbrite, it goes into the wallet of their phone. You can really curate a fan-friendly experience that has slimmer margins on your behalf. You'll make a lot more money working directly with a consumer. So do your homework in that regard. Make your site the gateway for purchases. Don't work with third-party vendors if you don't have to. More generally speaking, third-party vendors and middlemen will kind of trim your margins you have to work with and also limit the experience that you can offer your customer. So that's really, really important to take away from this all. Another big thing, before we move on, this affects analytics. And we didn't talk about it too much in the website episode. Maybe we'll talk about it in the future. But being able to target a certain demographic, being able to see your customer, get information from what they like and what they don't like, it's super important. And buying trends are a big part of that. So when are people more prone to buying your album? When are people more prone to paying for mixing services, to booking DJs? What do they look for in a DJ? When are they surfing this, that, and the third? You get a lot of this information from Google Analytics. And if you're sending somebody to some other place to make purchases instead of a gateway that's linked to your website, that's linked to your Google Analytics, you're leaving a whole bunch of data on the table. And so these scalping routines, these weird shady tactics that Ticketmaster allegedly is running, and any other barrier of separation between you and your client and your customer's dollar that doesn't allow you to track that data is a problem. So it's all the more reason to get that out of the way. If you're talking about my editing services, if you need work from me for mixing your vocals, you go to vocalmixes.com. Payment is handled directly there because we handle the quote system person to person, and there's not a weird middle party that dictates what we can and can't do. There's a lot more transparency, a lot more trust, and a lot more fluidity in that model. So we'll keep an eye on this, man. Price tampering is something that really bugs me. And I really want to see how this pans out. Again, at this stage, it's just allegations. I'm going to link to the CBC News article in the show notes so you can take a look. It's a really fascinating report that I think you can pull a lot from. Okay, so the next piece of news I wanted to talk about for the week, Spotify is allowing direct uploads and is launching in the Middle East and North Africa. Spotify seems like a company that just tries things and sees if it works. That's the model that a lot of companies are taking nowadays, and I'm with it. I'm cool with it. But I really do think the first thing that came to mind when I saw this was, damn, the pressure is on for SoundCloud. Spotify clearly has the reach. It has the user interface. People love it. The paywall has been the issue for independent producers and artists. People don't always necessarily want to pay for a DistroKid or any of the other direct publishing options, and also just the difficulty of it. You had a lot of indie producers, new artists, younger artists who just don't have that couple of bucks to spend on a service to get Spotify. With that taken out of the equation, it kind of pulls them away from SoundCloud, which has been the big alternative for that kind of market. There hasn't been a lot going on in the SoundCloud world, unfortunately, that will keep people there. It hasn't had too many good pieces of news in the past couple of years. So this is just another reason for folks to potentially look at another free option, and Spotify is a huge one in that market. SoundCloud Rap might become Spotify Rap in the next couple of years. This could be something pretty big. I think leasing producers, and when I say that, I mean producers, beat makers that publish beats and lease beats. I do this all the time. It's a really good way to get your brand out. I think leasing producers need to take advantage of this. You should start publishing your beats to Spotify. I said this before, you in this day and age should have a DistroKid account and publish to all of the streaming services. But at the very least, getting your beats on the Spotify give you further reach. You can link Spotify music to Instagram and play your music in your stories that way. It's additional streaming income. It's branding. It's proof of publishing in case somebody steals your beat, quote unquote, so you can now get your revenue after the fact. I really think this is a great option for having a kind of a place to tuck your productions and publish them right out of the crib without having to take that extra mile. You can publish how you choose to, but this is a nice bare minimum at the very least. With regards to Spotify making these moves in the Middle East and North Africa, artists like Akon and French Montana have been screaming get money in Africa for a while. We're seeing this huge international market develop, especially in urban music. I think it's really important for you to watch this market right now. Picture the artist that's in the Middle East that can now upload their art for free to Spotify and get that reach. That's huge. If they make the user interface mobile friendly, especially, I can see a lot of stories in the hip hop world and in the dance world coming out of North Africa, coming out of the Middle East that we never even heard before. A lot of perspectives that we've never encountered before, and that's really exciting. So as producers, songwriters, engineers, DJs, that's a space where I really think you should be looking at going forward. I can only imagine Spotify is going to put a lot of effort in trying to curate, great playlists and really push the music once it's rolled out there. And I would be really interested in seeing how the hip hop world especially blends with what's going on in the States. Mobile tech is really thriving, and I said mobile uploads are going to be important. In that section of the world especially, mobile is going to offer a lot of music related opportunities So it's going to be important for you to keep your eyes there if you're going to play in this game going forward. Spotify knows what they're doing and moving to that part of the world. These cell phones we use, the stuff that's in them is made and comes from that part of the world. So think about that. So the last thing I wanted to talk about in the lab report this week, we were discussing, I think back in February or March or something like that, the Music Modernization Act. It is passed. To describe this in context, I'm actually going to read from theboot.com. I think they did an incredible job in summarizing what this means. So currently, songwriters' rates for streaming songs are determined by a law established in 1909. Think about what that would mean for me in 1909. Jesus Christ. They wouldn't allow me to talk to most of you guys in 1909. Anyway, while performance royalties are determined by a 1941 law. Okay, so two dated systems. I'll repeat that because I interrupted it. Songwriter rates for streaming songs have been determined by a law that was established in 1909, while performance royalties are determined by a 1941 law. Also, songwriters and artists do not receive royalties on songs recorded before 1972. Think about that. Think about how many amazing songs were recorded before 1972. And to think that because of the way streaming laws are set up now, they weren't getting paid, it's ridiculous. So under the Music Modernization Act, streaming services including Spotify and iTunes are going to work together with publishers to make licensing more streamlined so they can pay out royalties for these songs that were recorded before 72 and give producers royalties as well. That's where things kick in for you. Again, publish your work, get your work through proper channels like Spotify to get your money. Additionally, the collective, or they would like to set up a music licensing collective to collect and pay out royalties from the digital service providers. That's where things are going to be really important. People think that if you are published, there's some kind of magical fairy that's going to pop up and just find money for you when your song gets licensed and gets played. It doesn't work that way. There's huge teams that are set up for certain artists in certain cases to get your publishing properly attributed to you. So I am happy to see that is considered in this legislation. They want to set up a collective that will go out and pursue those licenses for folks. It's a great career opportunity for people that are looking on the legal side of the business too. But I think all of this brings in a lot of real big considerations. We'll talk about three. First things first, copyright holders of works prior to 1972 are probably going to be more inclined to do business in this era. Now that their publishing is more transparent and there's a clearer line towards them getting paid for their work being used, I can see artists who might have been against samples, against covers, against interpolation, being more okay with it now, because we're hitting a point in time where people are saying, listen, we're going to be sampling music, we're going to redo stuff that we like, but we want to pay for it. And we now have the digital tools to collect that money. So for all of my producers that love to sample, keep that in mind. I think there was a long time where we thought sampling was going to die for lack of legal representation, and now we're in this cover era where people are covering rap songs, as backwards as that is. But with that in mind, I think artists are now going to be way more prone in letting you cover their work if you get the paperwork done right up top and everyone gets paid in the back end. Conversely, the second thing to consider, I guess, is copyright holders might start clamping down on their rights and their ownership rights way more than in the past, because the legislation is catching up and the algorithms are catching up and getting better at catching people that sample. So you are going to have certain artists that are more prone to collaborate and see the business opportunity, but you're also going to have artists that just see, hey, there's ways for me to make my money if people steal my stuff now, and they're just going to aggressively go after sample clearance payouts. Whether or not that'll be successful is a whole nother thing, but I think both of these two considerations lean us more towards handling sampling the right way, getting clearance the right way. Producers, sample clearance isn't always on you. In fact, it usually is not on you, and we won't go into that too deep, but usually the sample clearance side of things, when it does affect you, it's when you're a bigger artist, and it's usually more on the hands of the artist or the publisher or label. But I think it's important to know where you stand in terms of samples. With all of this going on, I think it's important to use some of the free resources and paid resources that allow you to sample legally. But there's a lot of changes going on, that's for sure. The last thing to consider from all of this, participate in local government, because this was a change that was really done from the ground level. You had local politicians who were also musicians, people like you and I who love making music but decided they had another calling, and they were the ones that brought this legislation to the forefront, and it was a unanimous decision after it was explained. Music and art and culture is super important for our day-to-day. It's what keeps us humans. It's what keeps us going. And it's important to remember the place of music and of creative arts in the political process. So we all have to participate in that. Local politics is super important. They literally stripped music out of school when I was a kid because a lot of us weren't on the grounds in local politics, and that's something that I remember. So do your part, see how you can help other creative fields. We're not just talking about musicians, videographers, all of the creative arts, all of the creative industries. They usually need some type of grassroots, ground level organization in the political process at some point in time, and we're a powerful hammer when we stick together. So again, our main topic this week is going to be on finding your sound. But before we get into that, I wanna move on and talk quickly about a lab technique, and this is going to be beneficial to DJs, but playlist curators, I guess, in general. One of the exercises that I talk about in this course that I'm writing is the birthday crate exam, and this is basically a practice technique where I'm teaching folks how to prepare a DJ crate. While you're figuring out how to set up a crate, it's important to think about your audience. So instead of just playing, or instead of just creating 90s hip hop crate or 2000s house music crate, I try to get folks to think more along the lines of who's listening. And one way of doing that is to look inward. So we have an exercise where I have you making a crate for your birthday. We're pretending that somebody else is going to DJ for you, and you just want to hear your favorite songs. And what I find that does, it shows people how much they have variety in their own library, and as such, how much they might want to have variety in the music they play for other people. So I think I'd love to see what you would do with a playlist, with a birthday crate. Hit our Facebook group, or hit us on Twitter, or hit us on Instagram. I'll put a post up. Hit us in the comments. Post 5 songs that would be the bangers in your birthday crate. What songs do you want to hear, when the cake is come out, we blew out the candles and everyone's drunk and ready to party and throw you over their shoulders and bring out the strippers, if that's your thing. What songs are playing on your birthday? I'm curious to hear your vibe. I'm curious to see what the community is listening to. And I'm curious to see where the exercise takes you. It's always kind of interesting to look inward. Once you've done that, done 5 songs for yourself, this is where it gets real. Go to Facebook, or just go to your phone, grab 3 friends, and make them birthday crates. Make them playlists. Make a 10 or 15 song collection of records that you think they would love for their birthday. And it's cool because you get to see how much you really know your friends and the people around you. And I encourage you to share it with them, because it's a good exercise and just reaching out to people. On the business side of things, again, as artists, a lot of us are introverted. So finding random ways to keep in touch with people is a good way to stay top of mind and kind of break down the walls of communicating to people if that's something you struggle with. So make a crate for yourself, make a playlist of songs, 5 songs or so, post those to our social media channels. Let us know what you're listening to. And then when you're done, find 3 of your friends, make them playlists of 10 songs a piece, and send it to them. Say what's up, see how you're doing. Say you're doing this crazy fun exercise for a podcast that you listen to, and these are a bunch of songs that you thought this person would enjoy. How on point are they? You can make a playlist in Spotify, or you can just copy and paste the name of the songs. I think they'll really, really dig it. So today's topic is important. We're going to talk about finding your sound. And what do I mean about finding your sound? We should define it first. Finding your sound, or having a sound, is having a distinct and recognizable vibe in your music, a distinct sound in your music. People know something is yours, assuming they're familiar with what you do, before someone says it's yours. There's producers that do this, there's DJs that do this, writers that do this, that you listen to already. Think about folks like DJ Premier, Murder Beats, Jalil Beats, Pierre Bourne, Ninth Wonder, Think of DJs like DJ Craze, Shifty, Rich Medina, Too Many DJs, Jazzy Jeff. All of these people, whether you love them or hate them, have a specific sound in mind, and they probably invoked a vibe when I mention their name. You can almost hear or see a Ninth Wonder beat if you know Ninth Wonder's music. Obviously, this all comes with the assumption that a person knows your music. And that comes from developing a sound. The reason why people who have heard a bunch of Primo records can identify future ones is because there's a piece of him in all of them. His sound has come and gone to a lot of different directions. He's worked in a lot of different lanes in the 20, 30 years or however he's been playing. But because he always takes the effort of finding and having and honing in on his distinct sound, we can recognize his stuff going forward. It's challenging. It really is challenging. But it's a really, really powerful thing that's super entangled with finding your overall brand. So why is this important? Since it's tied to your brand, since it's tied to your vibe, it dictates all of the other things in your career. We talked about your website and getting your message across and making sure it sounds like it comes from a person within the community. Your sound dictates the community that you should be dictating or curating to. If I have a gritty underground sound and a gritty underground vibe to my beats, my site and social media should reflect that. If I have a really refined house vibe to my music, my site and my social media and my branding should reflect that. So the more you have an idea of what your sound is, the more you can then design your site, design the things you say in your social media, design your branding, design the artists that you work with that in mind. And these don't have to be hard rules. You can definitely experiment, and you should experiment. But the more you can narrow down your focus in this regard, the easier it is to develop a package around the artist that you want to be and present that package to somebody to buy. So how can you tell whether or not you have a sound already? Because you might feel like you're there already. You might not know if you're there already. I think there's a really easy exercise we can do to determine if you know where your sound is. All right. So we're gonna imagine a scenario. You and I are at a bar. We're both solo. We both get to the bar at the same time. The bartender walks over, says, "What do you guys want?" We both order our drinks at the same time. Cool. Bartender goes away, starts to work on our drinks. We've got probably about a minute to talk, minute and a half before our drinks come back. So you ask, what do I do? And I say, I'm a booker for, let's say, Live Nation, Ticketmaster. I'm a booker, and I'm in town, and I'm looking for new talent. I'm grabbing a beer before I wait for my Uber. I'm going to go back to the hotel, call it a night. And then tomorrow I'm going to try to find as many artists, people in the industry to work with. What do you do? All right. So I want you to pause the podcast right now. Before you pause, let me set this frame. When I ask what you do, assume you're the type of producer, DJ, artist, engineer, songwriter, or whatever that I'm looking for. You're the exact person I need to be talking to. But you've got about 30 or 45 seconds to convey that. How do you give me a full scope of your sound, your vibe, your aesthetic before our beers get back and you've lost me as an opportunity? How do you quickly paint the image of your sound? So again, I'm a booker for Live Nation, new in town. I'm just looking for new talent. I'll be in it for a day or two. I'm going to grab a beer, get my Uber, then I'm gone. Tomorrow I'm going to try to find talent. You're what I need. I don't know this, but you do. So how do you convey that in 30 seconds? Pause the podcast, say it out loud really quick, and then come back. I'm serious, pause it. Okay, so now that you've unpaused this, hopefully. If you couldn't immediately describe your sound before my Guinness arrived, we might need to focus you a little bit. You should always have a pitch in pocket. You should always have what's called an elevator pitch. You can call it a bar pitch. You should always be able to very briefly explain your vibe, your aesthetic, what makes you you. Let me give you an example. If Swizz Beatz was the person, let's say a young Swizz Beatz was in this position, and he hears what would you do? He might say, I make really upbeat music, doesn't need samples, it gets East Coast parties rocking real well. Hardcore hip hop heads love me. Boom. 10 seconds, 15 seconds. You have a general idea of the type of music he has. It's upbeat. It's non-sampled music. The hardcore hip hop heads love him. Boom. Let's do another one. Let's say Pharrell is at this bar. I do really musically trained stuff. I have a pop ear with hip hop sensibilities. I play instruments and I can write any single you need. 10, 15 seconds, you have a general idea. You got a ballpark to play with. There's something you do really, really well. There's a vibe that you do really, really well. And the more we hone in on it and the more you're aware of it, the more you can then present it to people. And that makes you a much easier artist to pitch. That makes you an easier DJ to book. That makes you an easier engineer to book. And I think that's where we need to get your thinking aligned. So the important thing to know is it might not require anything new. You might not need to really reinvent the wheel. If anything, we might just need to narrow your focus a little bit. And I want to leave you with something tangible. So we have 9 tips to help you find your sound, find your aesthetic. A lot of these are going to be related to producers. A lot of them are going to be more universal, but I think we'll all benefit from hearing them. So the first thing you can do if you're struggling with your sound, with finding your sound, revisit your catalog for your personal favorites. Write down elements that you like about your personal favorites once you establish them. So go through your old joints, pick 5, 10, 15 of the best things that you like. They don't have to be completed pieces. They can be those sketches that you never finish, but just make you bang your neck back and forth real hard. Those are the records that probably resonate really well with you and you should explore more. Make a playlist of those, listen to them, grab a piece of paper, and write down what you like about them. Is it the drums? Did you use a weird kind of drum programming there? Do you see a bass technique that you used in each of those beats? Is there a way that you chop samples in most of these beats? There's going to be things that stick out in all of the songs, and that's what we're trying to pull from this sample collection. So find a couple of your favorite joints, the joints that you really resonate with, the joints you like making, that you're proud to play people, and kind of pick them apart and see why you like them. Number 2A in developing your sound. Focus your education once you found these elements on these elements. So if you notice that in all of these joints, you used a Moog style bass, really study that Moog bass plugin that you have. See how you can use it in ways that you haven't used it before. If you're sampling, really study sample techniques and try to find ways to push what you already like even further. This is what allows, again, when we talk about our examples, the guys like Primo to keep a consistent sound, but keep themselves excited and interested and keep the music evolving. The guts stay the same, but they go deeper down those chambers by constantly educating themselves. So number 2, focus your education on those elements. Again, revisit your catalog, find the traits about yourself that you like. And then number 2 is focus your education on those traits. The number 3 thing, and this took me a long time to really get into motion, but it works. That's designing your own sounds. If you're trying to find your own sound, making your own sound is probably a great way to start. If I'm opening up a restaurant and I want to stand out and be unique and do something other people can't offer, I can't go to another restaurant and then put their food on my plate and expect to stand out. It doesn't work that way. Music is the same way. If you want people to hear something and go, damn, I know that's you should probably start making your own things. You need to be able to have things in your library that nobody else has. And there's nothing wrong with using presets. There's nothing wrong with using Splice for inspiration. There's nothing wrong with collaborating. But especially if you're trying to find your own wave, you need to be starting from scratch. It doesn't have to be every track. It doesn't have to be every element of the song. But even just something as designing the lead line or designing the bass or just incorporating some of your sound design in one of the elements, it'll go a long way. There's so many producers you know from just one little simple sound design thing that they do. And then usually after a while, people start copying it and then that producer's moved on to something else. So that's a good way of doing it. Design your own sounds. If you struggle with it, we talked about calendars in our last episode. Scheduling a sound design session in your weekly calendar or your monthly calendar is a huge way to make sure you do it. A lot of times we just push this to the back burner. So scheduling it in that recurring calendar that'll pop up once a month or once a week saying, hey, you need to take the next few hours and just design sounds, will make sure that you do it. So number 3 was design your sounds. Number 4 is related to number 3. You're going to use those sounds you design to make templates and kits that we're going to start our sessions with. I start every session with a really rough template. Usually it's a drum rack in Ableton full of probably 100, one-shot samples, drums and percussive things, and a simpler and the bass plugin that I'm really digging at the time. It's a super simple template, but it jumpstarts my creativity quickly, and having a bunch of sounds that I go back to pretty consistently that I designed makes sure that there are elements in all of my music that show up again. I have recurring elements, and I have elements that I really learn how to use. There's kicks and snares that I start to reach for because I know they're in that kit. I've used them in a couple of beats ago. So designing your own sounds is an awesome thing to do, but it only really works if you then use those sounds. And this is a really good way of doing that. Once you finish designing kits, turn them into a template that you start with, and then use those in your next set of sessions until you start that process all over again. Number 4 tip, just to repeat, use templates, use kits, start your sessions with those. So the number 5 way of finding your own sound, we thought this was going to be tricky, right? No, there's tons of ways to do this. The number 5 technique to finding your own sound, just create more consistently. If you do things more frequently, the traits that you pick up doing them will carry on to the next time you do them. You're going to learn something cool on Monday making a beat. By Tuesday, you're not going to forget it if you make another beat. By Wednesday, you're definitely not going to forget it. It'll be habit in a couple of days. But if you learn something cool on Monday and then you don't make anything again for 10 days, what are the odds of you retaining it? What are the odds of that muscle memory kicking in and that workflow kicking in? And then it doesn't become something you repeat and refine. And refining is what we're looking for. So create more consistently. Again, going back to that calendar episode, use a recurring schedule. If you need to set 2 hours, 4 hours, put them in your calendar, stick to them, tell people, listen, you can't bug me during this time, and make sure that you're starting to work towards a consistent sound. The number 6 one, oh, you might not like it, but trim unnecessary equipment. Limitations are one of the best ways to get yourself to a specific sound. Some of my favorite Madlib tapes, I end up finding out that he only used one piece of gear. He was forcing himself to use one sampler and one drum machine. Some of my favorite placements from artists like Alchemist and Madlib and all of these underground producers, some of my favorite placements are the ones where they had less. And I think you have a more cohesive sound when you have to use 1 or 2 pieces of gears for the obvious reasons. It's the same piece of equipment, but also that limited workflow, that refining what you have access to. You push the creative side of yourself into the music more, and that shows up instead of the plugin showing up that everyone has access to, or the synth that everyone has access to. So there's way more room for your own personal creativity in the picture when there's less equipment to use to make the song. So start to take stuff away if you need to, and give yourself that room for just you to shine into the records. Next one is it sounds funny, but it really does work for me, and that's read your bio regularly. Kind of tying the branding side of things in again. Your bio should be a really good reflection of the type of music that you make, the type of DJing that you do, the type of mixes that you put out. So by reading your bio consistently, you will get reminders as to what you should be doing creatively. And conversely, if you find that your bio doesn't match the things that you're doing on a creative basis consistently, it'll tell you when it's time to update your bio. They work together really, really well. So if you haven't written your bio, this is a good time to do so, especially right after you put together a playlist of your favorite songs or your favorite mixes, your favorite whatever, your favorite creative pieces. When you have that, you usually have a really good sense of yourself and the dynamic that you're looking for. So if you haven't written a bio already or haven't tweaked it in a while, use that as an opportunity to rewrite it And then going forward, read this bio regularly to keep yourself on par and know where you're going and where you currently are. It'll show up in your music. I promise it will. The number 8 way to find your sound: get criticism from other people. It's going to refine you. It's going to hurt. And, you don't want yes people. Yes people are pointless. It wastes your time. So stop stroking your ego. Get people that are really going to give you honest input. And take that criticism, refine, go back, see what people like. Refinement is the real quick path to getting your sound. When you trim out the things that people don't really want to hear and then validate the things that people do, it'll allow you creatively to spend more time on that and see where it takes you. So get other people in the room, have your music out to folks. Other artists help really well with this. You can criticize each other's works. And yes, men, just fuck it. Why bother? Don't waste your time with that. So the number 9 is the final tip. We had a lot of tips in this one, but I thought it was really important. But the number 9 tip for finding your own sound is working on developing an artist. I think I always get the clearest picture of myself when I work on a few tracks with a rapper. Something happens when you have to enter the creative process with the person multiple times and keep it fresh. You really start to see, again, which of those core elements are a part of you and what shows up every time you guys and the girls are doing a session. And you end up more cohesive. This person's going to tell you what works and what doesn't. They keep you on par. They keep you focused down. And as much as we have access to doing a billion things, it's really good to focus yourself sometimes to get yourself to a sound that you can then pitch to a client and refine and really maximize before you move on to something else. So hopefully these tips have been useful. We went through a lot this week. If you have any questions, as always, my email is an open box. I love chatting with you guys and gals. labsciencepodcast@gmail.com is the best way to reach me. Also, check out the website, vocalmixes.com. If you're editing your own podcast, if you're a vocalist recording at your crib, you need some mixing work, I'm here to help you out so you can sound as good as I do right now. Until next week, Professor Sense. Peace.